Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 7th and 8th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline Comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to That Silverline Show on Tuesday. We have the wrong header up. Let me grab that real quick here. Wherever that went. Tuesday. There you go. Yeah. I'm your host, Tim TK, and you might notice he's a little quiet right now, but are joined by Jose Fuentes. Currently coming to us from the lobby of a hotel somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I hope you join us. If he's a little quiet, let me know. I'll see what I can do to fix the audio, but that is what we have for tonight. And we're going to be talking about building a comic book world. So the elements of world building, if you go through any sort of creative writing class, depending on the teacher you get, if they like genre, they're going to tell you that world building is the most important thing you can do. If you get a teacher who likes literary fiction, they're going to tell you that world building does not matter. And in comics, it's especially important to world build because there's also a strong visual component. So we are starting off the new year, so maybe we'll... I might try to be a little bit better about keeping discussions focused, but that's kind of not our thing, so we'll see how things go. But I do have some prepared questions for us to work through, and it'll let us, go from there. So whatever happens, happens. But at least we have some points to come back to.
The attempt. We make the attempt.
Exactly. If Jose is too quiet, you might just need to turn your audio up on your screens all the way. Okay. So when I think about world building, especially for genre work, and most comics are in genre, fantasy, science fiction, fantastic, what have you. Except for most Marvel stuff because it's just New York. But when I think about world building for genre, the thing I always think about is something that all of your genre enthusiastic teachers will tell you is that your world should be another main character. There's always something that grabs your attention, makes you want to know more about the world itself and not just about the people you're seeing in the world. Classically, every Potterhead wants to go to Hogwarts. Everyone who reads Lord of the Rings wants to live in Middle Earth. And it can be one of those things where even if you know the world is terrible in some way, you still want to be in it or immerse yourself in it because, living in Middle Earth, you're very likely to get stabbed by an orc or die by the age of 30. But, you get to live in Middle Earth, and that'd be great. So, Jose, what are kind of your thoughts on making the world its own character? What does that mean to you? Yeah.
I think world building is great. As much as it is important to make the characters, give them their own personality, giving different regions of your world personality is just as important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said there, giving regions personality, because we're D&D nerds, as stated on the channel many times, and that's a really good example. D&D is already separated into multiple planes, but even just in the current main universe, Faerun, with the Drist books and Baldur's Gate and all that stuff, you have Baldur's Gate, which has its own personality. You have Waterdeep. You have the Savage Frontier, Icewind Dale. Yeah, the Golden, the Silvery Marshes, and like the Golden Sands, and each thing definitely feels unique in its own thing, and you can spend hours just exploring all the corners of each individual city.
Right, and that's where my enjoyment for world building came from. I mean, like you said, we talked about role playing before, but the idea of trying to narrate and just describe the area they're at, just so that your players can get a better feel, better sense, of any foreboding you might have going on.
Right.
So I think that translates really, really well, and it's pretty important in comics as well. Definitely.
And it's one of those things that it's fun for us even just to do it because we love painting. If you're dungeon master in a game, or if you create mediums, you probably like in some way painting the picture either with words or with actual art, and just seeing the knowing that when someone experiences that, they're going to be awed in some way, because that's always the joys of when you describe something. Hey pops, when you describe something in a D&D campaign, right? You want everyone at the table to be like, whoa. But right. You can also reinforce that in yourself when you experience world building. Classically, in that same vein, the opening to Skyrim, once you finally get out of the castle and you walk out the mountain path and you can actually see the world that they developed. So, of course, as creators, we need to ingest media to know what we like and how to present that and create our own media. So, Jose, what are some examples of moments when pieces of art or books or comics or movies or wherever where the world building really hit you hard?
I think for me it was when Marvel Comics started introducing the Savage Land.
Oh yeah.
That was you took them in from New York or wherever they were, with the Great Lakes Avengers and whatnot, but you would all of a sudden be transported them into an entirely different scenario, entirely different genre. All of a sudden, dinosaurs and crazy mutates everywhere and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think that was just bold. To me, that was a huge jump from what everyone is accustomed to just flipping everything on its end.
Oh yeah, absolutely. To see in the same vein, for me, I have some experience with when they introduced Limbo, and when they continue to go back and develop later on with different characters, and you get to see a different side depending on who goes there,
right.
And all different things that reflect Magic's experience in Limbo is completely different from Doctor Strange's, and they have moments where they intersect. But seeing moments where they go into there essentially is a different hell dimension that isn't exactly hell, but it operates in a weird way that's weird and tricky.
Right. That's weird to me. It's hard for me to grasp.
Yeah.
I feel I think the physicalness of like I said, velociraptors attacking you and with that in that regard, or even when was it the X-Men we're in the Outback.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean?
yes.
Entirely different scenario, entirely different mentality, like of what they can do and what they can get away with, because there was nothing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And he says something there where, like, you know, you didn't grasp onto Limbo as much as I did, but you grasped onto Savage Lines more than I did. And, you know, world building can be different for everyone. Everyone has, like, you know, you have some people who are more sci-fi heads and people who are more fantasy heads. And, you know, comic people are typically somewhere in between, because comics are somewhere in between. Or you can enjoy both, but enjoy different elements of both. Like, some people only like hard science fiction where there are set rules. Whereas people like more of the science fantasy where, yeah, faster than light travel because we said we can. So you like more of having that. Well, for that at least, you like having the more physical grounded element of the Savage Line opposed to the wackadoo of Limbo. But if you were to, you know, go further on the scale to like science fiction or fantasy, do you also like the more grounded elements there, or do you like, is there a point where you start liking the stuff that's a little more out there?
I like sci-fi in that, you know, especially like anything that's like graphic, like it's in the future. You know what I mean? I like that stuff like that, but for me, it's more the fantasy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And was it X of Swords, Swords of X?
X of Swords.
Yeah, when they started going into, I can't even remember what it's called.
Avalon, yeah.
You know what I mean? All of a sudden, the typical X-Men characters all of a sudden becoming medieval and whatnot. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Like, that's more of what I can grab a hold of. You know what I mean?
Sure. I like that too. I think what my thing is, I like things when there are systems, but systems that don't necessarily need to be heavily defined. So I like Limbo because there's a system to it, but the system was that things don't work the way you expect them to.
Right. So you don't have to over-explain.
Right.
You
Yeah. But then when I go into like science fiction, I like things like The Expanse, where it is hard sci-fi. Like there was a clear line of theoretical science that explains why things are working the way that they are. Or then even going back to, well, I like the indie fantasy because it's just kind of like, but even then there is a loose system to it, and that, you know, druidic magic and ranger magic comes from the Feywild, and if you're a celestial caster, then your powers are tied from an element to some god, and things can interfere there or what have you. So there is still like a loose system, but very loosely. But I also like Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives, where there's a very clearly defined and hard set magic system. Like, no, this is the science of magic. This is how you magic right.
Nice. Yeah, I can definitely see the benefit of both.
Definitely.
I like when I don't have to explain much.
Definitely. And there are moments too when I like things just to go absolutely like bonkers wild. That's why I like Warhammer and stuff like that, where their explanation for faster than light travel is demon dimensions. You have to travel with the demons to go faster than light. That's how it works. There's no other way.
Right. That just makes sense, right?
Yeah. The orcs paint all their vehicles red because red is the fastest color. And because they're innately magical, they are. The red is the fastest color. So if you paint something red, it goes faster.
I think that's 8-year-old mentality, because you had red tennis shoes, you ran faster than everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Now we kind of went over stuff we like and why we like it and why we think you like it. Writing and world building. You'd almost think that certainly in, you know, traditional books, the onus is on the writer to build the world, because that's all there is to it. It's just text on a page, and it's your job as the writer to show everything. So, but in comics, as a writer, I don't say you get an easier job in the world building, but you get a different job, and it's not on you to paint the picture. You provide the scaffolding and the outlines, and then the artist will actually assemble the world within that. Yeah. So there are different ways to go about that. The way I write, I find that lends itself to world building really well, and I think you can see that in Wolf Hunter, and then eventually when Soul Senate comes out, you'll be able to see that. writing essentially full outlines beforehand and then full script where each panel has its own description, because I'm trying to paint the picture in my head as much as I can for the artist to then interpret and paint their own picture, sometimes literally. And somewhere along the line that matches the dialogue, and then the reader gets the final version of the world. But you get them getting this really cool exchange where the world has essentially been built 3 times. First in the head of the writer, then in the head of the artist, and then it finally gets interpreted, and the pages and the spaces in between the panels gets completed by the reader. So as the artist or inker, or however you position yourself in that timeline, Jose, as the more artistically inclined person in the process, how do you feel about that process, and what do you like about it?
I mean, I think I said it before.
Yes, definitely.
I like working, like if I'm doing any kind of work, or even if I'm creating of anything, any world and whatnot, like keep in contact with the writer, right? Like, because I've created, like, especially for role playing, I've created an entire map.
Oh yeah.
Map everything out. You know what I mean? What is over here? What's over here? You know, the climate and whatnot. And just for everyone to complain about this much of the whole thing.
Yes.
But it explains like where a particular character came from, and I guess the regional stuff, like I said. But I actually enjoy that. I know it sounds weird to some people, but I actually enjoy that. That's fun. And being a part of that, and so from a creative point of view, like if the writer is descriptive, that just makes it that much more enjoyable, I think.
No, yeah.
Because yeah, you can, as an artist, you still put in your own feels, you put in your own, you know, concept, your own what's the word? Your own inspiration, I guess, into it. But that inspiration still comes from what the writer wrote, and if the writer's descriptive, then I think that just lends to really like helping, you know, like a very like vibrant world.
Definitely. And I think it said something cool there. That's, you know, if the writer's descriptive, it can help provide inspiration for the artist. And I think a lot of new writers, when they get into it, they're afraid of, you know, am I being too hand-holding for the artist? Am I being too domineering?
Right.
Am I not giving enough? And I think there is. I think if you're ever a writer, you should always go on the side of giving more, kind of whatever medium. The only exception being exposition. If you limit your exposition at most times, if possible, but unless you're creating, you know, an apocrypha style book, because people pick up your apocryphas because people like worlds. But
right.
Always on the side of, you know, providing more detail. I mean, there's something like you can be controlling to an artist if you get to the point where you're spending an entire page describing one panel, essentially saying it needs to be exactly this way. But if you're describing the exact motion being taken, you know, the style of what everyone is wearing, the type of room it is, you know, if there's something that's important to the plot or something that is important to the character, mention it, because the artist isn't going to read your mind from, you know, however many miles away. But, you know, provide as much detail as you can, because, you know, unless you're taking a full page, you're probably giving the artist just food for them to churn out more stuff, because, you know, if you, and also provide references, if, you know, you're asking for
specifically want, like there has to be this concrete statue of an eagle staring down while picking its nose with the claw, and that's detrimental to the story. So like if you have a reference or something like that you like, specifically want in there, like, oh, but this Maltese Falcon has to look like this.
Right.
You know, that's
definitely
important.
Like, I wrote a comic and I had to essentially reference, like, he's wearing scale mail in the style of scale mail in the style of Lorca Sigmentatum, which is the Roman imperial scaled plate.
Right.
I don't expect every artist to know that, so I just found something off Pinterest attached to it and is off with it. It's like, it's not exactly this is just the style for his sci-fi armor. So
Yeah, I
and-
did that for I basically call it a murder board. I did that
Yeah.
when I had designed characters for school, and one of them was like I picked a Cebu, which is like
Mhm.
cousin to a water buffalo. I picked a Cebu and wore like a Turkish armor. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
leather plate, or not leather plate, but leather panels all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I had to describe what that looked like and pull up references for that. That was a blast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Uh, but yeah, I think it's very hard to go overboard with details as the writer in comics. And if your artist does have an issue with it, they'll let you know when they should. Maintain healthy communication. But and that's just kind of, you know, one part of it, because you also spend time, like Jose had said, depending on how deep you go into it, you might need to, you know, create a map or create systems and infrastructure and all this other stuff. Writing Wolf Hunter, luckily I didn't have that issue because you know, London is a real place and it exists. But I did have to, you know, figure out like how fast did trains run back in, you know, 1940, and what was the time from, like, how long would the train ride from London to the northwestern ports be? What would the weather be like?
So did you do that to help with pacing?
Yeah, help with pacing. Like, okay, is this going to be like, is this a story take place in one day? Is it take place over 2 days? Would there be a sleeper cabin on this train? Or were they still running private cabins at this point? And also, fun fact, there's actually a lot of private cabins on trains because all the like big public cabins got requisitioned for supply trains.
Right.
And you know, working all this other stuff into that. And it is fun going through and just kind of researching and building out your own storyboard. Like your board, your world. I'll go into the big two later on, but what they call it would be the story Bible. More often than not, at least if you're independent, like, you're going to have more text in that document than you will in your finished product.
Right.
Yeah. I think, well, depending now, because Batman, I think, had the record for the biggest Bible. But of course, there's a ton of Batman things, but I believe they need to update the Bible several times a year, because there was one of the few properties where, like, yeah, just introduce new characters all the time. We kind of don't care. Just make new characters. Yeah. I know also some people have their favorite parts. For me, I'm always a fan of again, I didn't really need to do this for Wolf Hunter because it was Allied England and Nazi Germany, but for other things, I like creating the political and governmental structures. Which empires at war with who, which small kingdoms or duchies are working with what. Is there a spy in this kingdom who's doing this for another thing? Blah, 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 blah. Because you're going to end up creating more characters the way you go down that, and characters provide some of the best plot hooks that tie you back into the world. I know some people get really into the economics too. I do lightly, but I know some people are all about, like, there's a river here, so that means that they probably do. They have like a wood chute, and they probably have good farming. So this is an agricultural town, and they probably trade with this place, which is a mercantile kingdom. Well, so Jose, what are kind of your favorite parts of world building? What kind of things do you really dig into when you're creating?
Not that. Other than terrain, I enjoy describing terrain, especially when it comes to, like, in regards to, like, different adventures that I've done. You know what I mean? Describing, like, ancient ruins or statues and stuff like that. Like, that stuff I like to explain. I like to describe.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna have a jungle and there's gonna be a overrun temple there. Like, it's role playing. Of course, it's gonna be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
The best part is to explain it. The best part is to describe it. Like, it's mosquito buzzing around their faces and stuff like that. Some of that I can translate into comics.
Yeah.
But most of my experience with world building was with role playing.
Oh yeah.
And I don't like getting into. I like getting into the lore. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a history here. There's a story that was told for this particular relic or this particular like destroyed temple. So like, that's the stuff I like. I like the legend stuff as opposed to like the political intrigue.
Yeah.
Probably because politics doesn't appeal to me. I mean, I literally had to ask people what certain things meant about our government
Oh,
because I didn't understand.
sure.
And thankfully, they didn't laugh at me too hard when they explained it.
Yes. Well, the nice thing about writing, I like to go for a web of who doesn't. Yes, I like. I do a lot of vampire. I think, well, vampire especially, but with writing my version of science fiction and the fantasy I like to. The nice thing is I can kind of avoid all modern day politics and base it mostly off of Roman politics or the politics surrounding like the late Middle Ages, the creation of Magna Carta. How did like all the the barons rebellion? What did that political structure look like? Or even the Reconquista of Spain. Like the politics there weren't as clean cut as you might think, because there are a lot of people who kind of were working for either side or didn't know what it said. There were some Moorish dukes who were working with Spanish kings, some Spanish dukes who were working with the Moorish kings, the Caliphate, and El Cid, the knight who worked for both sides, got married. El Cid is one of my favorite characters from history. So I like that type of politics. If I had to go to create a world where, well, maybe if I get too deep into the Roman stuff, I might need to. But having 3 days of filibuster discussions, that might be a little too much on the political intrigue. But
6 years later.
Yeah, exactly. I think the two things you said there are also really important for creating a world that sticks with the reader, and that is the lore and also the minute details that really paint the image. So the minute details, like you said, the mosquito buzzing around their head that you have to swat away, whatever. And you can even do that in comics where, if someone's going to some place that they do in, comics all the time, they're in a volcano or whatever. Just, you can reference it in text, or you can just show dude sweating, or even change the way their costumes are designed, like the X-Men changing their costumes working the Outback and all this other stuff. Or even when now the change in costumes going to Krakoa, and everyone's now wearing more sleek, futuristic, and very militaristic type outfits, or it looks like, oh, these guys are, actually in some sort of uniform because they're
except for Marauders. Marauders are like pirates.
Exactly. we gotta. Well, even then, I mean, that's a good example because you have the Marauders who are essentially, the golden age of piracy buccaneers working for Krakoa.
Right.
And they're dressed like pirates. So you have a panda wearing a headband. Yes. Okay.
You do.
Yeah, but one of my favorite things is with X-Force, we get a tactical Black Tom Cassidy. Black Tom being like one of the weirdest dudes, but he's wearing, he got rid of the collar. He's just wearing a tighter vest, bandoliers.
I like Black Tom back in the day. Was it with the black and red outfit that he had?
The black and red, yeah. They brought back the black and red color scheme, but they just changed the way it looks. It looks like he's not just some guy who crawled out of the vines. Even though he spends most of his time crawling out of the vines.
Right.
And the other thing being the what's it called? Oh, the lore, the history, because that's what makes the world seem lived in. You don't need to, create a, you can create a full 1,000 years of history of who knows who's, and George R. R. Martin did that, and perhaps that's why we're not getting book 6 anytime soon for Game of Thrones. But giving each region how the Exiles interconnect is glorious, I agree. That's one of the reasons why it's like the only mainline comic that I still read, is because of how well how much brain power the editor seems to put into the Exiles. Because it's always a different team, but I feel like Marvel always gets like the editor who's okay with getting the least amount of sleep and just like pouring over everything to work on those. But creating small legends and fables about towns, like, oh, we don't know how we got founded, but this is what my grandma told me, and all this stuff, for giving characters their own lore and backgrounds. And if you create a religious or god system for your world, what's the creation mythos? What is the are the gods active or inactive, and what's the reason? Therefore, was there a schism and the gods had to leave, or was there some fight? The gods like, okay, we need to watch over everyone, so we're gonna stay here now, or put sentinels. Kind of like thinking about the Colossus of Rhodes. The gods are fighting, humans are kind of dumb, so we're gonna put some titans outside of Rhodes to make sure that people don't kill the city.
Right. I like the idea of adding pantheons to a story, or a world as well. Like that, you just mentioned that, but that's actually, that helps to define some of the characters. Like some people in this village, they may be overly devout, and then even taking aspects of real life, like say, if you take a particular region and they are very much like Amish people, you know what I mean? Like you're beyond of any fantasy world on that. I know it's fantasy world regardless, but then you have people in cities, major cities that look down upon them. It's it happens here too, regardless whether it's Amish people or any other culture that is different than the norm, than the status quo. So that's interesting to include that into it. Man, there's so much you can do when you build worlds. Seriously.
Absolutely. We just created characters for a one-shot, or not one-shot. We created the Intercession Zero for our new campaign, which is going to be we actually opted to do a long-form campaign, so hopefully we can ruin the DM's lives over the next 2 years. I'm not DMing this one, which is going to be fun actually to play again. But the world he created, he did something kind of similar, where he wanted to mirror kind of the Reformation, but take it to extreme.
Interesting.
Also mirror that. So the idea is that there's two main gods, the embodiment of order, the embodiment of chaos, and at some point the gods fractured and each became two. So you end up getting people that worship the old personality of order, and then the reformers worship the new personality. And the same thing happens with the Chaos Pantheon. And kind of looking at the creating of denominations within that, what if that was actually a little representation of, the gods splitting apart? So essentially more churches fracture off that are all, denominations of the same church worshiping the same god figure, but they all believe in a different aspect of him, more so than the other ones do. So the god of order is also, a part of him is the god of agriculture and all this other stuff. And so, and because that, getting a ton of churches to grow up, so it creates creating a very faith-based society where it's impossible to escape. Every town has its own separate church, which may or may not be related to something else. And the same way that your artist can interpret the world that you create and run with it, as a player or as a reader, you're going to interpret something and run with it your own way. So if you're a writer who is inheriting some established world building to create a new story in, which, in comics, what happens more so than other mediums, if you end up getting picked up by a publisher with a long-running title, hey, we want you to write a series based in here, go do it. You don't necessarily need to go buy the book. You can find ways to play around with it. So what I did with my character, I used 2 books. I used the Eberron lore book to choose my race, and the Tasha's Cauldron to pick my subclass. So I'm a Kalashtar Psy Warrior fighter. So very psionic based, but the way we're flavoring it is that my character at one point was in the Job Got Ron. He's like a mob enforcer. At Job Goes Run, he dies, wakes up 100 yards away. He recently resurrected, and there is now something else inside of his body, which he quickly learns to understand. It's a spirit which may or may not be from this world, but there is a spirit which has escaped the afterlife, which he's been told like there's a set afterlife that works this way, and now there's a spirit that is co-inhabiting his body and giving him psionic powers. So his whole thing now was like, man, I gotta like catch up on my religion and figure this out.
Right.
So he's a mafia-based character, so he's like a little inherently selfish. So his first thought is, well, if this thing that's haunting me escaped the afterlife, maybe I can too, and maybe that's my best bet at getting some level of immortality.
Wow, that's pretty in depth, dude.
It's pretty in depth. Yeah, it's fun. But yeah, that's the way you kind of think about, you're presented this world within it, and you're like, okay, what are some tools I can use to play with that? When you're writing something that's set in a world, or if you're writing historical fiction, you're presented a world, but you don't necessarily need to present that world in exactly that way. You can find ways to play with it. That's kind of the same way I think you need to think about it. It's like writing Wolf Hunter. I didn't just want to write the story of the Tizard mission in a very straightforward retelling of World War II history. I wanted to create a spy story in there. So what's a plausible way to play around with that? And how can I fit in something that is unique and interesting in a story which is at this point set history?
Right. I have a comment on that. I drew blank. Sorry.
No problem. Let's see. We did get a chat. I've been working on a modified Japanese mythological system set in San Francisco, which is fun to work with. Nice. Definitely makes me think of Blade Runner or Shadowrun. I love. Also Ghostwire. Sci-fi Japanese mythos. But yeah, I mean that's a fun way. You're presented with the Japanese mythology and the city of San Francisco, which are two set things, but how do you combine the two and find ways to play around with them or explore it in ways that may not have been done before?
Yeah, that gives you options. You know what I mean? You have pre-generated reality, I guess. You have San Francisco, they're buildings that people are going to recognize. You want to make sure that people are going to recognize the buildings so they recognize the location.
Yeah.
And then go crazy with all the neo.
Yeah.
Stuff into it.
And that's whole thing where you can how do you fit in have a wind spirit fight Oni on Salesforce Tower, or how do you incorporate the what's the city tram, all of other fun stuff in there. So I did actually have our next question here. So kind of going over all the different things we like to research at world building, all the things we like to play around with it. When you're starting to build a new world or starting to work within a new world that a writer's presented to you, or what is kind of your starting point for research? What do you dive into first?
I think for me, like I said before, it's history. If I want to create a history, I create a part of a world. Like I said, people playing about that big of it, right?
Yeah.
But I ended up having a desert area, and I was playing a lot of was the Stone Prophets, Ravenloft Stone Prophets.
Yeah.
So I really wanted an Egyptian feel to it, and you know what I mean? The sand itself was trying to kill people. And even though the players never ever went in that direction, but I had it set up ready to go. But it's always searching, I guess the references that I look up. I mean, if I see a picture that I like, I want to incorporate that in. But that's part of the research for me. What animals would be in this climate? What's going to grow here? I like stuff like that. I know, like you said, mentioned people like the politics part of it, but I like researching what flora, fauna is going to be in this particular area. I'm not going to have, an oak tree full of lush leaves and whatnot in an Arctic area, because then it's going to be so out of place. Anybody that even has a remote interest in that in real life is going to be like, oh, that must be a plot thing, because tree growing, and I'm just like, oh no, I'm just a moron that didn't know it couldn't be there.
Right. You don't want
So
to
I like to look at my references. I like to keep my references.
definitely. You don't want to create an accidental Critical Role chair where the chairs are so out of place that everyone gets focused on it for over an hour.
You're right.
Oh, definitely.
But that incorporates into like comics, because my comic Devil Boy, it's it's set in like a Serengeti temperate type of like region, and I say Serengeti just because I like the trees that are there. It's very flat. It's very like a plain area, and off in the distance you see, you can see the mountain
Yeah.
ranges and whatnot. But like there isn't much to hide behind. There isn't much to, what I mean, in the pictures that I have for reference anyway. So everything is up front. Everything is like you see it coming, so you're trying to protect yourself or defend yourself as such, right?
Right.
So when I was creating the the landscape for Devil Boy, that included I had to include that fact that there's not going to be hills or like giant like forests for people to hide behind. When
Right.
it comes to the antagonist for Devil Boy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like everything's going to be up front, and as much as I don't necessarily do subterfuge, I had to stretch myself and like work to include some of that. Otherwise, everyone's going to see everything coming, and I kind of want to hope to surprise people. You know what I mean? So I take the landscape into that effect as well, like
Yeah.
how the players, how the characters in the story are going to see. Like I said, they're going to see everything coming. Nothing's going to be like, oh, there's an undercover night. Everything is up front.
Yeah.
So how do you defend yourself against something that you know it's coming, and more importantly, how do you like not so much trick, but how do you like outwit someone that sees your actions as well?
Yeah. I think what was also interesting with writing Wolf Hunter and me being more focused on like writing the research and doing like the political intersection stuff, end up running into creating similar issue and then overcoming that, creating a spy story that's all set on one terrain, right? Everything seems like it should be up front, but you need to create layers of subterfuge to get around that. So I had to research reasons why people would lie but still be good people or be innocent people. So essentially, I ended up creating a variation of a train, right, of London, where this guy's stuck on a train full of liars, and he's trying to find one liar in a group of people who all have something to hide. And so that's a line I think he actually has coming up towards the end of it, where he says like everyone is lying about the wrong thing. It's like I can brag about their lies, but I need them to lie about the right thing before we figure out what's happening. And so you end up having like on the political on the political personal side of that, whereas you had to research like how do people move at night, what would you use to find terrain and cover, like how would you avoid something that is coming when like it seems like any sort of like cover is very scarce,
right?
Whereas I'm looking at okay, why would nobility want to lie at this time period? Why would a commoner or like some person who's just going from London to Surrey or whatever, why would they need to lie? Why would or Dover, and finding things about like, well, at that point a lot of people were losing a lot of money to the war because they're essentially selling off giant plots of land. So there are a lot of nobles that were previously well-to-do were now suddenly on the verge of going bankrupt. And so they had to lie to keep amends or do back alley deals in order to get land back and all this other stuff. Dealing with the fact that even though England is part of the Allies, if you were Romani or Jewish, you weren't necessarily welcome to disclose that openly to people because they thought you were part of the problem. And so kind of finding new ways to essentially make people liars when the story, when the hero wants them not to be, but the story demands that they lie. How do you find liars in 1940s England? And so you're just kind of stealing real lies that people would have kept hidden and then putting them in a location. The same way that you would find, real elements of maneuvering and staying hidden and put that into a geographical biome.
That is a lot.
Yeah, that's the fun ways to think about role playing is you're essentially you're creating something by pulling things that happen and then putting them into your own setting and putting your own little spin on it.
Right, and those are like little for character nuances and whatnot that help to create the layers for, like you said, the story on a train. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At its base core, it's a story on a train, and you have to create those layers that keep people wanting to peel and look.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh, where's this headed? It wasn't necessarily. I mean, other than historically, I know that the Quentin Cathedral in one of the pages for the Christmas book, I think.
Yeah,
right.
You can have that. He did. They did two things that Richie required a ton of reference. The first is he did the interior of St. Martin's on the Field.
Yeah.
Did it scanned in. The other one was the exterior of the BBC a day after a British bombing run had dropped essentially an aerial mine that detonated on the fifth story window.
Right.
And so you had to find the right location to put that marking in.
Those aren't necessarily those are aspects of the world that helps to fill in on this train ride story.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's little things where that's not all the world's defined by, but you do those little details. It's like the guy swatting the flies away and he's walking through a swamp. It's that little thing oh, something happened here that caused us to look this way, or this is an actual event that people go to and it has pretty significant significance, which is why they're using this big church. They're using this big church in the middle of still being bombed by the Germans. So you end up creating these levels of implied significance or implied history to the events surrounding the characters.
And that's cool. I dig that a lot.
Yeah.
Because to me, those are just added things to just to strengthen the story. You know what I mean? That just for some things like I said when talking about in Amazon style rainforest and overruns, ancient temple and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Those little stories that the villagers are telling about the area. Each person is going to have a different story that they're telling, but if you laid them all in a row diagonally, they all tell the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's fun. Introducing that, you know what I mean, into a story where I think it's a little, to me anyway, and I haven't tried it yet, I'll be honest, but trying to incorporate that into a comic book story, I think is a little different.
Oh, yeah.
You would almost have to lay the panels out all across and then have each person tell the story, just slowly work its way across.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The page, so you can see that each person had a little bit of it. But when in regards to role playing, that's easy. Just have them go. The people are going to go. Your players are going to go and investigate it, and you're just well, yeah, this person. And me personally, for a story like that, I tend to write it out. That way, when I'm actually like telling the story, I'm actually reading what I wrote. That way, I know,
Yeah,
where to line up at.
definitely. There is some interesting ways you can. I think if you work well with your artists, there are some interesting ways you can almost kind of do that in comics as well. Like you had said, where you need to lay each thing out differently in a panel. But you can still make that visually interesting depending on, how wacky you guys are willing to go with the panel structure.
Right.
There was, and also you need to be okay with abridging scenes, which I know some writers like the darlings, but if you can abridge a scene and get the reader the information in a way that is much more compelling than talking heads, I choose that all the time. But there was, I think, was it Department of Truth? Oh, it was that or something else, where essentially the protagonist had done a series of interviews to complete an investigation. But instead of showing us each individual interview, they are in what is like a church with a stained glass window, but they turned all the stained glass into a different panel. So each piece of stained glass is a different character, and it's their part that creates the full truth in that section of stained glass.
That's neat. That's nice. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm always find ways to abridge storytelling and find ways to get wacky with the panel structure because that'll allow you to, make the characters and the world that much more alive because you're unveiling the truth about the world in a way that makes the characters much more digestible.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it has been just about an hour. I don't know if we'll go for a full 90 minutes today. I think we'll let Jose get back up to his hotel room. The hotel lobby. But yeah, any final thoughts, Jose, on world building?
Those teachers that prefer the literary aspect and only want to create characters and whatnot, I would fail that class.
I know. Yeah, literary fiction is I appreciate it, and I have written and published some, but it's, you can only write about a person having an epiphany while a kettle boils over so many times.
Right.
Yeah, it's I need my robots with laser eyes and my giant dragons.
Right, no kidding. And enjoy your thesaurus.
Yeah.
Like, when it comes to describing your world, when it comes to like talking about it, like saying, oh yeah, this cool part right here, and it's cool because of that, and the cool part about it is, dude, come on.
Yeah.
There's a thesaurus for a reason.
Definitely. Oh, I think that's also probably something important to mention before you do go on is, I give this advice all the time, and every other writer does. Is don't over-explain. Show don't tell, all that stuff. But don't confuse that with cutting all the detail. Like when you're creating a world and you're creating a world building, turn it into an absolute meal.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you
I've had where I was doing artwork for a story, and it didn't last very long. Me working for this, but I guess the writer was pretty descriptive, like, oh, this character is doing this, and I think he was flipping in the air to kick somebody, and very descriptive about kicking them with the left foot and whatnot, but like didn't tell me at all where they were.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, that's a great scene in the air.
Yes.
Like, where is this happening? Like,
Right.
I don't understand. So yeah.
Yeah.
Be generous with your descriptions.
Definitely, be generous with descriptions. As a writer working with a different artist, the establishing shot works for two reasons. One, it gives the readers context and it allows you to be descriptive and really create that like world building meal where it's like we get to see everything about where they are, and you can see all the cool toys that we've created for the reader to enjoy the universe. But also it works for the artist because now you grounded them like this scene is happening here.
Right. And
Yeah.
we're taught like sometimes like it's okay to like create your establishing shot, and then you don't have to worry about it the rest of the film.
Oh yeah.
Depending on how the story plays out, you don't have to worry about the rest of the film. But it's like they're at a cafe, be very descriptive about the cafe you're doing, and then it's just a matter of heads talking.
Mm-hmm.
There's different angles as an artist. There's different angles that you'll take to expedite getting that page done. You know what I mean? Without sacrificing, the imagination of where they're at and what's going on.
Absolutely. Every Avengers comic get to the mid comic splash. You get the helicarrier.
Yeah.
It exists for a reason. It's cool. It looks cool, but also it sets the scene.
You're right.
Yeah. All right. My cat's eating my other cat's food, so I'm gonna throw a penny at him real quick. Down the head. All right. But yeah, that has been that's my show on Tuesday. I've been Tim TK, joined by Jose Fuentes. You have been you, dear chatters. We'll be back next week. I do actually have a subject this time. Let me pull that up real quick. Next week we will be talking about where did it go? There's next week is the 10th, and we're talking about comics and color theory. So if you're a colorist, or if you if you enjoy painting at all, like I will be bringing even though I don't do any comic art, I can bring some relevant subjects, because I do paint miniatures and portraits and busts all the time, so that's my thing. So I'll be bringing some color theory in there from a painter's perspective as well.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I got a couple thoughts on that.
Okay, cool. Be sure to check out 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday and Sunday for Wednesday Wham and Silver Sunday. We'll be back next week, 8 p.m. Pacific Time on Tuesday. But until that time, make mine Silverline.
Silverline.
Hey, I'm Pat Broderick. Make mine Silverline.